have the distinct honor to introduce Ms. Jane Williams, who served as Acting Director of the Federal Transit Administration from August of 2017 until January 2021. As Acting Administrator, Jane managed some of the largest formula and competitive grant programs within the U.S. Department of Transportation, representing more than $80 billion in economic investment in transportation infrastructure across the entire United States. She has nearly 30 years of experience in federal and state government, along with work in the private sector in the areas of transportation and infrastructure. Jane currently serves as Senior Vice President and National Practice Leader at the prestigious American architectural and infrastructure design firm, HNTB. Prior to her role as FTA Administrator, she was a Senior Advisor to the U.S. Department of Transportation's Secretary, Elaine Chao, and previously the Director of the Washington Area Transit Office of the Maryland Department of Transportation. And prior to that, a Senior Legislative Advisor to Congressman Andy Harris, who serves as a member of the powerful Appropriations Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker for the Jacksonville Transportation Authority's 2026 State of the Authority, the Honorable Jane Williams.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that kind and very long introduction, Andre. The secretary used to say, sounds like I couldn't keep a job, but I have been in the industry 30 years, so there's that. It's great to join you today with your board of directors, CEO Nat Ford, and the dedicated FTA team, local elected officials, community leaders, and current members of the US DOT team joining us here and also online at JTA's State of the Authority event today. It's always great to be back in beautiful Jacksonville, even if it isn't quite as warm as I had hoped. It's definitely warmer here than in our nation's capital. One of the many reasons I'm also glad to be back in Jacksonville is because of the partnership that FTA and JTA forged during the first Trump administration, when I led the FTA under Secretary Chao's leadership. My team at FTA was never boring. And my time at FTA was never boring. My team wasn't either. It began with a total solar eclipse, followed by 3 major hurricanes, Harvey, Irma, and Maria. 2 of the 3 having major impacts here in the state of Florida. It was followed by a 35-day shutdown of the federal government, the longest in federal government history until recently, and then finished with the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite these challenges, I'm proud of what we accomplished during the first Trump administration and the things that we were able to do here with Nat Ford's leadership at JTA. Many of you may not know this, but Nat was literally the first transit CEO I met. When I began my tenure at FTA, and it was at my first annual APTA meeting in Atlanta. It was just a few weeks after I had been sworn in as the acting administrator, and at the time, he was the incoming chair of APTA. I had the opportunity to introduce him to Secretary Chao, and together, we walked the expo floor. And even back then, Nat was focused on innovative technology. We both wanted to show her what is innovative in transit at that time. I'd like to think of that as our first partnership, Nat. When hurricanes and other natural disasters struck, I reached out to transit CEOs in the affected areas. Most of them were caught off guard by why someone was calling them from Washington, from the federal government, offering assistance. They didn't really know what to do with that. But not Nat. He was prepared. He had heard I had called Tom Lambert at Houston Metro, and that I asked Tom, how could I help? And Nat had a list. By the time I got to him, he had not only a list of how I could help JTA, but all of Jacksonville. So it just shows his leadership, his ability to lead in a bold way. And under that leadership, he put together an amazing team here at JTA. His executive team is one of the strongest in the country, and it includes a very good friend of mine, Greer Gillis, JTA's Chief Infrastructure and Development Officer. Greer and I go back to our days in DC, And she continues to bring dynamic leadership here to Jacksonville and to JTA. The JTA team won multiple grants under almost every single FTA competitive program we had. More than $100 million in federal competitive, so I'm not talking about formula-driven money, even COVID money, $100 million in investment that he brought back from the federal government to JTA and to the city of Jacksonville. The two largest of those grants were under FTA's Capital Investment Grant Program. That's the largest transit infrastructure program at FTA, and most would argue the most complex in the entire federal government. And I know a little bit about that because I worked for 2 other presidents across 3 other departments. And let me say, the CIG program is the most complex. Even defense programs are not as complex as this. And you all won 2 grants, not just 1, but 2. Of the 33 full funding grant agreements were signed here with JTA. They were 2 bus rapid transit projects. The First Coast Flyer, who I actually had a chance to ride on with Nat, and the Jacksonville Southwest Corridor, totaling nearly 35 of that $100 million investment in transit infrastructure here. In fact, JTA brought in one of those projects ahead of schedule and under budget. Let me say that again, ahead of schedule and under budget. Glad somebody clapped, yay. Under the first Trump administration, we realized that the federal government wasn't incentivizing project sponsors to do just that, to bring a project in on time and under budget. In fact, we were doing the opposite. If a project came in ahead of schedule and under budget, the project sponsor had to return the remaining federal portion of the funding back to FTA. What that did was incentivize them to spend every single last federal dollar they could. And so as a result, we changed that policy and we allowed the project sponsor to come in and to pitch us on why they should keep that funding and why it should stay and remain with the project. And I have to tell you, there was only 3 projects across the entire country that qualified for that. And JTA was one of them. I think that deserves a round of applause too. That was $13 million in grant funds that you were able to repurpose here in Jacksonville. You know, JTA was so successful in so many other programs across, like I said, across the entire FTA. You won 3 passenger ferry grants, 3 transit-oriented development grants, a bus and bus facilities grant, and a low and no emissions grant. And that is just under the first Trump administration. So one of the key reasons for their success was JTA's attention to the fact that we had written in innovation was a factor in selections. And they paid attention to that, and that was a big part of their success in all of our funding programs. So when JTA brought the U2C project to our attention, we listened. We were interested. We wanted to collaborate with our trusted partner and support them in taking on this bold and innovative step because we wanted them to succeed. JTA had delivered, and so when they came to us, we looked for ways to help them get this off the ground. And so we strategized on what other programs across USDOT could fit this. And most of FTA's funding programs are very detailed and very monitored by Congress. They're written in law, many of them. And so there isn't, a big, bucket in the back office where you can say, this is a great idea, we want to fund it. There just isn't that capability. In fact, they have a very small research and strategy and transformation budget there compared to the billions of dollars that go out for infrastructure investment. So, we need to figure out how to be better at that. But when we talked to them, we said, tell us a little more. We want to know a little more. So when we talked to them and got more fully briefed on the project, we learned that the project was going to use aging infrastructure that still had years of useful life and remaining federal investment, which is important, in a new and creative way, using technology, including the deployment of autonomous vehicles. Innovation was one of 3 of our key priorities. You heard me say that we did it in every FTA grant, but it was a key priority for President Trump and Secretary Chow in the first administration, along with infrastructure investment and ensuring our transit network was safe for the traveling public. We believe that innovation and technology were key economic drivers and tools to maintain the U.S. competitiveness on the world stage. So as we looked for other funding programs across the department that had the capability to fund this innovative project, there weren't many, but we found one. And it's the Better Utilizing Investments to Leverage Development Grant Program. That's a mouthful. We shorten it to BUILD, to fund the concept of what U2C was going to bring. And although innovation was a key priority for USDOT, unfortunately it wasn't for the rest of the transit industry. They were very slow to adopt innovation, and Nat has been a leader in that space for as long as I can remember. And that is truly not an easy thing to do. And so a lot of times other transit agencies kind of want to step back and just say, we'll let them take all the risk and plow those green fields, and then we'll come in after all those things are done. So under his leadership, he provided a roadmap for the entire industry on how to do more with less and use technology to get there, specifically in the deployment of the AVs, which is key to mobility innovation and the future of mobility across America. Congratulations on the launch of your Navi service last year, America's first public transportation system powered by autonomous vehicles. That is a big deal, a very big deal. And I want to congratulate you also on attracting Holon to come here and to invest in Jacksonville, with the North American manufacturing headquarters generating new jobs and millions in economic development to build AVs right here in the United States, in Jacksonville, ones that will meet Buy America and Build America requirements. The U2C project is paving the way for the future of mobility in America, and I was happy to support the advancement of this project while serving as the acting administrator, and I look forward to watching him improve the mobility landscape in Jacksonville and provide safe, reliable, innovative mobility solutions for the people of Northeast Florida. While I was the FTA administrator, I often said, FTA leads the way. Well, today, I believe it's appropriate for me to say, JTA leads the way. Thank you again for inviting me to join you today. I look forward to once again riding the First Coast Flyer while I'm here in the city, touring the Autonomous Innovation Center, and looking at and experiencing the AV deployment firsthand. Thank you for your leadership, Nat.